Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to St. Raphael School Open House about our liberal arts tradition. Our liberal arts tradition is a very rich tradition, and since being around since 2013, when we were founded by Dr. James Taylor, who then became Father Porphyrios of blessed memory. Our liberal arts tradition is rich and deep in content. So we're here tonight just to talk about that tradition and what it looks like in our St. Raphael School curriculum and how it actually functions. And so welcome tonight. And of course, I want to welcome our guest speakers, Dr. Aaron Moulton, who is lower school instructor, also teaches Russian and assistant to the SRS principal. We have Dr. Alexander Titus, the man with two first names. I will say that forever, Dr. Titus, forever. And he teaches upper school humanities and Greek. And then we also have Mrs. Sarah Smith, who in her own right is a scholar of Old Testament and so much more. And she will also be teaching upper school humanities, liberal arts, and catechism. So welcome. We're going to start with a prayer. So Dr. Titus, do you mind leading us in a opening prayer, please?
O Christ our God, you have ascended in glory, granting joy to your disciples by the promise of the Holy Spirit. Through the blessing they were assured that you are the Son of God, the Redeemer of the world.
Amen. Yes, blessed ascension. So just a few housekeeping tips. If you have any questions that you would like to ask, we do have a Q&A box at the bottom. Please use that, and all of us will man that. That's much easier than the chat box, because the chat box, we could miss something. So please turn in your questions there. Our agenda for the evening is as follows. I will speak on the liberal arts program, what it looks like, and of course, Dr. Titus, Mrs. Smith, and Dr. Moulton will chime in accordingly. And then Dr. Aaron Moulton is going to talk about, what do the liberal arts look like for young learners? And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A and some tidbits about our wonderful community. So having said that, when we talk about St. Raphael School, one of the parts of the liberal arts tradition is for us to be relational. Right? So relational is really important to us. And of course, at the heart of our school is community. And of course, our focus is always Christ. And so that is a really key point when we talk about the liberal arts. And, I affectionately say to my families and my students and the instructors, we love, laugh, learn in that order. Love, laugh, learn. And it's all about, first, we have to establish that relationship. SRS is a school within a school of Schole Academy. We're part of that greater academy. Now, of course, Schole Academy also has two other houses of study. We have the Aquinas House of Studies and the Canterbury House of Studies. Aquinas for the Catholic tradition, and Canterbury House of Studies for the Anglican tradition. And we're, of course, St. Raphael School, the Orthodox Christian tradition. So who are our liberal arts instructors, our core liberal arts instructors? Of course, we are a liberal arts school, so everything we teach is some way connected to the liberal arts, but our core liberal arts instructors is in order down here at the bottom. We have Dr. Aaron Moulton, who's with us today. We have Mrs. Sarah Fothergill. She teaches level 4 and 5. Mrs. Melissa Savit, she teaches level 4. Presbytera Jennifer Moore, who teaches level 2. Elias Diamond, who teaches level 6 literature, Mrs. Smith, who is also here, teaching level 6 history. And then we have Dr. Alexander Titus, who teaches level 7 and our newly established level 8. So these are core liberal arts instructors. And what does that mean? Well, that means in the various levels that we do teach, they focus on those levels. And I can actually show you that. Let me flip to that page right here. You can see that our liberal arts program goes from level 1, age 5 to 6, right? K1 grade level, all the way up to seniors in high school. And there is unrepeated material for actually 14 years. Of course, sometimes our students only take 1 year of something versus the 2-year rotation, but levels 1 through 6 all have a 2-year rotation unrepeated. So we have different things that we focus on, as you can see here. For example, if we take level 5, liberal arts, 1 year is American classics and the other year is British classics. So these instructors here are core liberal arts instructors, the ones that teach our core program. Now, when we talk about the liberal arts tradition, this is the paradigm that we see, and this is the paradigm that we actually function from. We are going from what we call wonder all the way up to wisdom. So we go wonder, worship, work, and wisdom. And many times the different levels, and Dr. Aaron Moulton is going to be speaking about that in the lower school, the different levels have each of these things, but they function in a different way based upon the maturity of the student. So what to know, how to think, how to live, whom to love. And so the liberal arts tradition is important because it's really, the focus is about how, the virtue, the knowing, the how-to of the curriculum. So I don't want you to take my word for it. I have this video with Dr. Christopher Perrin, who's a CEO of Classical Academic Press, to which Scole Academy is a service provider of. And so he has some wonderful words about the liberal arts tradition. And it's a very short video that I want to watch, and then we'll continue from there.
Hi, this is Christopher Perrin with a word about the liberal arts. You've probably heard of the liberal arts. In a previous video, I talked about why the liberal arts are called liberal, and we named them. There are 7 traditional liberal arts: grammar, logic, and rhetoric, the trivium arts that master language, and the quadrivium arts of astronomy, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music, the arts that master number. Well, often folks who say they've studied the liberal arts can't name those 7 liberal arts, but there they are. They're the arts that enable us to become and to remain free human beings, free from tyranny, free to be able to learn anything for ourselves because we can read and write and reckon and reason. The arts are called the liberal arts, the liberating arts, we might call them. But why are they called arts? How would you answer that question? Why aren't they just called the liberal subjects or the liberal disciplines? Why do we call them arts? Well, you know the word art, don't you? When you think of the word art, what normally comes to mind? Something made? Something made by human hands? Art or an artifact? Something artificial would be something made by human hands as well. An artifact certainly is something that's been made by human hands. Well, it comes from the Latin word. These 2 English words come from the Latin word ars, artis, and it means essentially art, something made. Well, why would the liberal arts be called the liberal arts, especially if we're thinking of grammar, logic, and rhetoric, which have to do with learning language? How are those arts? Well, if the word art means something made. What is being made by the liberal arts? Well, in the classical tradition, the first thing that was really being made was a human being.
Mhm.
Human beings acquire the fullness of their own capacities, become the fullest versions of themselves by studying these liberal or liberating arts. That's how they were thought to be. And as you were acquiring the capacity to reason, to use language well, to reckon and use mathematics well, you were acquiring the ability to do what only human beings could do, and to do it the very best possible way you could. So humans were actually cultivated and made by these liberal arts. But once a human was capacitated to become the fullest version of himself or herself, that person also was equipped to become a maker or an artist, a liberal artist, you might say.
All right. So when we are talking about the liberal arts, as we discussed previously, we're talking about the virtue, the formation of our students, of each of us, not just the students, because we see ourselves as a faculty of friends. We see ourselves as sojourners in learning, and it's not something isolated, and that's why it's so relational. So when we think about our liberal arts program, you will see it has many components. Our liberal arts curriculum is designed to offer the heart of classical literature-based education integrated into a single course. Now, this is really important. So within each liberal arts course, we're talking about reading, writing, rhetoric, history, literature, right? Orthodoxy through the lens of orthodoxy, and also an undertone of natural science. So it's taught in the spirit of Orthodox Christianity through a restful scholae pedagogy, which means that we're not worried about quantity, but we're actually thinking about quality. We're pitching our tents in certain ideas and certain thoughts and certain questions and diving deep into those. And we make sure that our class sizes are limited so that students can cultivate a depth of learning, and learning can become personal. And this is key. So for us, it's about integration, it's about humanities, it's about the classics, it's about the core, it's K-12, it's relational, it's orthodox, and it is scholae. And these are really important factors when it comes to our liberal arts curriculum. As we said at the top of the hour, our core curriculum is 8 levels. Level 8 is a new level, which Dr. Alexander Titus will be teaching this year. So Dr. Alexander, did you want to speak just a little bit on level 8, as it is a new level that we're just adding this year, and how it ties in with, of course, the previous year, which is level 7?
Yeah, of course. So basically, this is kind of think of what it's doing historically. We're kind of picking up from sort of the late Middle Ages, sort of like 15th century, and really going all the way up into the modern period. Actually, the most recent book on there is Alexander Solzhenitsyn's The One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. So we're really trying to give students kind of a sense of what's going on historically, what's going on intellectually, what's going on culturally, because so much stuff is going on there. And it's really, again, really kind of trying to get a sense of that scope. So this is going to take us through, again, sort of the late medieval period, Reformation, early modern period, but then through through the 17th, 18th, 19th, and then 20th century. So it's actually pretty comprehensive in terms of just the again, the scope. So we're going to be reading, as I mentioned, Russian novels. We're going to be looking at modern Greek Orthodox thinkers. We're going to be looking at sort of late medieval texts from the fall of Constantinople onward, going back to the earlier period. And then we're going to be looking at sort of these classical texts of the European Reformation. So early modern Roman Catholic texts, early modern Protestant texts. We're going to be reading some of Luther. We're going to be reading some of Thomas More. So it's really kind of, again, trying to give students a scope, not just of, or give students a sense, not just of the scope of their own history as Orthodox Christians, but really kind of what's going on in the world. What's going on in Western civilization, that kind of thing. So it's really kind of trying to do both at once. And I think I've got it in such a way that we really get a sense of that.
Yeah. One of the things at SRS, of course, all of our instructors are Orthodox Christians and practicing Orthodox Christians. And in addition, we look at the liberal arts, the good and great books, the discussions, everything through the lens of orthodoxy. Everything goes through the lens of orthodoxy. And so as Dr. Titus has explained here, even though we're going to be reading other traditions, because at this level, it's important for our students to be able to grapple with these differences and similarities and the historical aspects. It is done through the lens of orthodoxy in an environment in which they can grapple with these questions and deep dive. You notice, so level 7 and level 8 are just 1-year courses, but from level 1 all the way to level 6, once again, we have 2-year rotations, unrepeated. So you can take a look very quickly just from the scope and sequence here is what our focus is. Now, we already did mention level 5, and we had Dr. Titus talked about level 8, and then of course that connects, and level 7 scaffolds into that. But Mrs. Smith is here, and she actually is teaching level 6, which has a 2-year rotation of Greek and Roman rotation. And so this year, Mrs. Smith, can you talk about a little bit about the Roman year and, what kind of the focus is for this coming year in the ancient civilizations?
Yes. So this upcoming year is the Roman year, and it is paired with, I should say that level 6, there's 2 classes. So Mr. Elias Diamond teaches ancient classics from the kind of literature being the base, as reading great books and jumping into the literature. And I'm teaching the ancient classics, but from a historical view. So it's really meant to take these classes in tandem to get the full scope. Now, if you can only take one, that is also okay. It's not like you're going to be, missing something where you just can't understand the other class. So, but they're meant to work off each other. So, in the Roman year, we're kind of starting formally with Cicero, the War of Actium, and then shortly after, just, Jesus Christ hitting the scene. And we will, because it's the Roman year, talk about kind of the ancient Roman kingdom and the Roman Republic, but that will also get hit in the Hellenic or Greek year as well. So it's kind of that's going to be split a little bit, but we're really going to focus on Rome as an empire and some of how that ultimately will end up declining, like the fall of Rome. We're going to trace that. We're going to work our way up to Constantine and even into the Cappadocian Fathers a little bit. So we're kind of focusing on Rome in all of its Roman Empire glory and what that was in terms of its governance, its culture, its civics, its religion, how it just functioned, and some of the things it did well and some of the pitfalls, while also at the same time examining the early church. So when the church was a minority, when it was kind of secret, when there were martyrs, when there was persecution, when it wasn't in vogue as the whole kind of society is structured as being a Christian nation. So it's holding those two in tandem as we look at the pros and cons of everything in that era and time frame, and how that all just connects to who we are, and even finding who we as modern Orthodox are in that history, because the church was birthed in this time frame. And so we kind of want to hold that intention and explore the best and worst of all that has to offer.
Beautiful. And again, this is, you know, upper school, and we talked a little bit about a middle school program. As you can see here, we do cover American classics, British classics, and you can notice that there is a building of the scope and sequence. So when our students reach upper school, they have all these skills behind them. We're going to talk about the lower school, and Dr. Aaron's going to talk about that in a little bit. So I'll leave the lower school scope and sequence here just for a moment. But I also want to draw your attention on our school has basically, the way it's set up, has 4 legs, if you will. The one is the core liberal arts. The other is the humanities, which there are several various courses that you can take, and we can talk about those. The third is our languages, Greek, Russian, Arabic, and then, of course, the fourth is our catechism. And I wanted to point out that our catechetical program, our formal catechetical program, the core program, does also have from level 3 all the way up to a new course that we are offering, Senior Patristics Seminar, that Father Nikolai Myers will be doing. Again, all in the liberal arts tradition. So what do we mean by integrated? Well, as you can see from this depiction here, when we talk about all of the various parts, the arts of the trivium, grammar, dialectic, and rhetoric, offers a broader and more comprehensive framework, but all of this interrelates. Everything is spiraled together. So when we're talking about integration, we're talking about looking at what is true, good, beautiful, building virtue, as Dr. Perrin said, you know, helping the formation of our students and ourselves along the way with the liberal arts, the liberating arts, as he has called them. So all of these things are important to understand that they're interrelated. You know, one of the books too, if you're not familiar with it, Poetic Knowledge, The Recovery of Education, was written by Dr. James Taylor, you see here, also known as Father Porphyrios of blessed memory, who reposed a couple of years back, but he was the founder of our school in 2013. But this book talks about, and this is what we highlight in the liberal arts tradition, going from that wonder into wisdom, right? The wonder, worship, work, wisdom, through those stages. So wonder to wisdom, what does that look like? Well, in humanities, you're going to find literature, history, poetry, nature studies, arts and culture. It's relational, it's creative, right? Because we're made in God's image. It's integrated because it has an arts focus, efficient. It's a faculty of friends teaching and growing and learning together, faith-based, and of course the classics, right? Good to great books, enduring moral values, captures wonder, invites discussion, ennobles the spirit, right? It ennobles the spirit through beautiful style of a poetic sense. So this sense of wonder to wisdom is what our liberal arts program is about. Another way you can take a look at it that here is using the tree. We start, you know, from the grammar phase, this root phase, and then we move up into the dialectic, gaining understanding, asking why and how, and then of course the rhetoric, where we're bearing fruit. And it's really important that these things interrelate each level. It's not as if we leave one down, but rather, as you see in the depiction, it's something that is connected completely and constantly comes back around on all of these different aspects within the liberal arts tradition. So what about the lower school liberal arts? So Dr. Erin Moulton, who is our SRS assistant to the principal, and also our lead teacher in the lower school, she's going to talk about this. And this is one of my favorite quotes, Dr. Erin, favorite quotes from The Wind in the Willows, which we do in level 4, but it is one of my favorite quotes. Would you like to read it or shall I?
Oh, you can read it. One
Okay.
deserves to read one's favorite quote.
Oh, thank you. The mole was bewitched, entranced, fascinated. By the side of the river, he trotted as one trots when very small, by the side of a man who holds one spellbound by exciting stories. And when tired at last, he sat on the bank, while the river still chattered onto him, a babbling procession of the best stories in the world, sent from the heart of the earth to be told at last to the insatiable sea. Ugh. So when we talk about the liberal arts, for me, this quote encompasses that wonder, worship, work, and wisdom all in one. And in lower school, it kind of looks a little different than what it does for Dr. Titus and Mrs. Smith. So Dr. Erin, do you want to come to the mic, and I'll actually go back to that page there.
Sure. So I guess I should say this, our hope, and it's not just our hope, because we are seeing it come to be, is that what we're building in the older school, in the lower school, is students who can really succeed in the upper school. And that's not to say that you can't enter our school at any stage of study. And actually, I see that there's some questions coming in about that now. So we'll continue to cover
it was
those.
so perfect.
Yes, I didn't even realize that. I looked up.
That's
and saw
okay.
it.
The question is, what if I have an older child who did not take classes in the lower school? Are they still able to take the middler or upper school level liberal arts classes?
Yeah, so absolutely. You can enter our school at any point, and we love to share the joy of learning with everyone. So we're happy to have you join it at any point of study, and we definitely have students who do that. In fact, before I get into a little more details about what we do in the lower school, to be honest, we have families that may not want their students doing this kind of study when they're 5 and 6 and 7. They may want them to wait and start at age 8 or 9, or they may want them to wait and start at age 10. We have others that start at sometimes even 4 and 5, and that's perfectly fine. We always have room in our arms to bring students in and teach them the joy of beautiful words and of the beautiful arts. So there's always space for that. That said, what are we doing with the younger students? Well, we're really teaching them, first of all, to love words, to love the natural world, to love building language, and to build creativity. And we do that using really carefully chosen texts and activities that encourage them to learn to love language and build their language skills, to love the natural world and understand how it works, to begin learning about history and geography and music and art. And at the same time, because we're able to do this in a Zoom classroom, builds the opportunities to share their ideas together. So we know at these early stages that children learn best by memory work and by imitation. And so what happens at the very earliest level, in our level 1 illustrated classics, we read together so many beautiful illustrated children's books that are read at home in advance or after, and we also read together in class. So all kinds of books, that some that you might know, some that you might not. We have a few that are Orthodox saints' lives or sacred stories, but of course we also read from Beatrix Potter. This year we did the Velveteen Rabbit as well. We laughed, we had a lot of rabbits. We read some classics like Harold and the Purple Crayon, The Snowy Day, Caps for Sale.
Blueberries for Sal.
Blueberries for Sal is coming up in this rotation.
Yes.
It's one of my absolute favorites. So a really great collection of beautiful works. Those students also began learning to pray aloud, and they do that by repeating and by memory. And that's very fun to see them do. They also work on poetry. In one year, we do Robert Louis Stevenson's Child's Garden of Verses, and in the alternate year, we actually do A.A. Milne's poetry. And so they learn to read and recite that aloud, and they're building early reading. Some of those children can read already on their own,
Yes.
and some can't. And it is beautiful how it works together. This coming year, we're introducing a new aspect to that class, which is we are going to be deliberately working on phonics, reading and spelling, where in the past we focused primarily on the stories themselves. But I should also mention this group loves music, so we do a lot of singing together. And we had so much fun this year with Bach and Tchaikovsky, all kinds of work learning about the orchestra. So Peter and the Wolf was one of this year's stories. Then in level 2, we begin to build up. Those students are reading on their own. A lot of them are. They start doing early chapter books and some very early writing activities, creative writing activities, I should say. So we have copy work activities in level 1 and level 2, and they begin creative writing in level 2. There's some fantastic books in that sequence. Winnie the Pooh is one of my favorites, but Paddington Bear gets in there too. Lots and lots of fun. Presbyteria is showing us some of those. My Father's Dragon, Little House in the Big Woods. Really lots of beautiful works. Many of those they can read on their own, and some of them they maybe listen to an audiobook or have a parent read aloud with them. And level 3, then, I think of level 3 as a group of students that are learning how to branch their skills into what we might think of as middle school. And I teach this course and I adore it. These are some of my favorite students. They're 4th and 5th graders. They're so eager to learn. And we have so much fun together. The focus that I find really important for level 3 is on genre. And so we focus a lot this year on these 2 years on learning about various literary genres intentionally, because this helps them to prepare for when they get to Dr. Titus and to Miss Sarah Smith, so that they know that it's reading a novel is different from reading nonfiction, is different from reading a novel in verse or an epistolary novel or a biography or an autobiography. So we learn all of those genres, and then we do so much writing by imitation. So if we read an epistolary novel, we write our own letters. And if we read a novel in which the voice is an animal, we have some fun novels like that, then we may write some little piece in the voice of an animal or a stuffed animal. Sometimes they'll use a pet or something. We do some delightful science activities, both with the natural world and also this is the perfect age for simple machines. So we read the biography of the Wright brothers and we have to build our own flying machine. All kinds of fun activities that we do at home and then share together. And Presbyteria mentioned that our study of the liberal arts is relational. And this is probably one of the best things that we offer to homeschool families in the Zoom classroom, is the ability for students to share their work together, to get feedback from friends and from peers and from teachers. And I'm a homeschooling mom. I always say that my kids have often told me, oh, Mom, you just said that was good because you're my mom and you have to, which isn't true, of course. But although I do think what they do is wonderful, but it's really fantastic to get feedback from peers. And level 3, we actually start a favorite activity in level 3 is We do a monthly debate in that class where
Yes.
students have to get into teams and debate a topic. They're often really challenging topics for them to think about. And we have a simple approach to debate that works well for this age of students, for like 9 to 11-year-olds. But they have judges and they have to choose a winner always. They don't get to say, oh, everyone did a good job. And it has to be based on the merits of the argument, not on their opinion. And so it's a great opportunity for families who are schooling at home to give those kinds of discussions to their students. And that's the way we're bridging then into the middle school years with this group, is they're beginning in level 3 to think, oh, how can I take a concept that's a little deeper than I originally thought and start to build on it and start to apply it. They're just starting to be ready to do that at that age. And so we're just sort of building those little skills. My last comment is we always do a novel in verse in this class, and I love it because we are actually using some sort of modern novels in verse intentionally. The one that we do that I love is called Love That Dog. I have it sitting right here because it's one of my favorites. But we learn a new poem each month, and then we also always have a novel in verse near the end of the year. I love this because these students are not ready to read the Iliad, right? But I love that they get introduced to the genre. So later, maybe they're going to read Pushkin's novels in verse, or maybe they're going to read some of the classics, but they learn early on what that genre is so they can build into it. It's so much fun. They're a great age, and I have loved seeing us build our lower school curriculum, our faculty, the ways that we have learned to take students from the screen to the outdoors. So we do things like we make class bird lists where we report what birds we're seeing out in nature during the week. We always talk about what's going on in the natural world at every level. So we really try to integrate their family life with what we're doing in our classrooms. So.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Aaron. And, it's really important that all of us do go from the wonder to the wisdom. And as we build, our students then build skills. So I want to reiterate, even if your student hasn't come to us for the lower school, they can definitely enter at any time they want. Now, as Dr. Aaron mentioned, we have built out our lower school. We have, of course, remember our pegs of the stool. We have liberal arts, or the chair rather. We have our languages. So we even have languages for lower school, Russian and Arabic. We have our humanities, of course, and then, of course, our catechism as well. In middle school, very similar. We have our liberal arts, our language, our catechism, and then you see our humanities. We have several interesting electives like theater, and of course, our music and art is always there. Iconography is a huge path for our students to take. It does begin in lower school with the fundamentals of art with the focus of iconography, and then gets into the actual iconography with our artist, Mrs. Randy Maria Sider Rose. And then, of course, our upper school curriculum that has even more choices for students, even book clubs on faith. We do have a New Testament Greek track just for high school students. So if you actually come in and are into high school, you are able to do that as well. And then, of course, we offer adult courses. And we do this as a service to our families. Because our families want to learn New Testament Greek, and they want to learn, about catechism and Byzantine chant, and, interesting classes like astronomy and Holy Scripture, the heavens declare, for adults and for upper school. So there are many classes that are being offered. And in addition, our classes aren't just for homeschool families. We have several classes that are slided in the afternoon times at 4:30, at 5 o'clock, some of them 3:30, for students that are in brick and mortars and want an enrichment class. And we have the ability to offer that as well. So many of these classes can be found in that after school, quote unquote, after school time frame. So we have classes that build virtue, and we have classes that are fundamentals, and we have humanities, and we have languages, and overall, it's about that liberal arts tradition. And again, to reinforce what Dr. Titus, Mrs. Smith, Dr. Moulton, and I have said, you know, when it comes to education, as this quote says, it's more than the transference of knowledge. It is a transmission of values, culture, and the proper ordering of loves. And as Dr. Perrin said in his video, is in the end, then what we are, we give. So to love, right, to laugh, and to learn, and all of that is integrated. So this is just a small taste of what the liberal arts tradition is at St. Raphael School. And so I see that questions are coming in. Continue posting your questions, and we'll answer them as they come. A question just came in and said, we are a Roman Catholic family. Would it be appropriate for us to take classes with SRS? Specifically, my 6-year-old is extremely excited to take your iconography class. Yes, yes, and yes. So one of the things that we mentioned, and Dr. Aaron can talk about it at a lower school level after I speak on this, is we have families from many traditions. Actually, not even some, we had a couple families, not even of the Christian tradition, that came to us. And I always say the story because the answer just boggled my mind when I asked this parent, and I said, you know, we're going to be talking about Christianity and the faith, and obviously you're not from that tradition. Are you going to be okay with that for your student? And this was a middle school student, and actually also lower school, if I remember correctly. And the mother's response was yes, because of the caliber of teaching. And that really struck me. And of course, all faiths are welcome, and we respect all faiths. We do teach through the lens of Orthodoxy. We do talk about the saints. We do talk about feast days. We do talk about hymns. We do talk about specific things, but our catechetical program is where really the nuts and bolts are taught, right? Are deep dived. In our liberal arts program, or our iconography, or even our book studies, or our poetry classes, those kind of things, yes, it is through the lens of Orthodoxy, but we're not taking deep dives into theological discussions. That's not what the specific classes are for. That's done in our catechetical program. That's where it belongs. But it is through the lens of Orthodoxy that we do discuss things that come up. For example, one year I was teaching Alice in Wonderland, and we were talking about Alice and what does it mean to be like in Wonderland, and the students kept on bringing up about her being on a journey, right? Because it's coming of age story. And then it came up, well, you know, are we on journeys? And then that tailed into Saint Mary of Egypt. And so these are the kind of things that just happen naturally in the liberal arts classroom. And, you know, we do talk about those things. And again, it's integrated. It's not something that can be parsed out, but rather it's something integrated. So to the long answer to your question is yes, it is appropriate. And Dr. Aaron, I'll let you speak a little bit more as far as the lower school is concerned.
Sure. I mean, the simple answer is absolutely. And we love having all kinds of students
Yes.
in our classes. And we do have a variety of students. In fact, we have a quite diverse student body, which is delightful. I'll even say really specifically, not only do we have students from varied faith traditions, we have students from various countries of the world. I just got something in the mail today from a student from Montenegro who has studied with us for several years. We have students in Greece, in Hong Kong, in Australia, New Zealand, I think. So at Canada and the United States, wherever. We have someone on a sailboat, I think somewhere. I'm not sure. But so we have a lot of diversity, and also in terms of the way our class is structured, there's one comment I did not make about our classes, and that is that we do follow a liturgy intentionally for our class. The time that students are in class with us, we always open and close with prayer.
Yes.
In our lower school, it's very common in our 3 levels of lower school that the opening prayer will also be accompanied with a sort of an study and a discussion of the icon for the current feast. So it's very common that we might be looking at the icon of the nativity, of the ascension, of whatever is recently going on in our church calendar. So we're really focused on that. And I will tell briefly a story about that because I think it kind of explains how that integrates. We are always teaching from an Eastern Orthodox lens. So I had a beautiful moment in the lower school with a student who was not from a Christian tradition. We don't have lots of those students, but we have some here and there. And we were looking at the nativity icon in the preparation for nativity. And the student raised her hand and she said, well, I noticed this icon is very crowded. And I said, oh, yeah, you're right. And it is. The Orthodox nativity icon has all kinds of things going on. So not only does it have Christ and the Mother of God and Joseph, but the midwives are there washing the baby, and the shepherds and the magi, and there's angels. There's a lot going on. And I said, yeah, you're right, it's crowded, and she said, well, I need to tell you why I think that is. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, well, in the Christian tradition, Jesus is God. So obviously, a lot of people would want to be close to God. So that icon must be crowded. And I just stopped. And I said, well, yes, thank you very much for teaching us today. And so we have so many beautiful moments like that. That's just one example. But we always are keeping that lens. But we welcome all kinds of students, and I think we truly grow through all of our interactions together.
So I think that's really important. Our community is a community of friends, a faculty of friends, a faculty of learners, a community of learners. It's synergistic. We can't divorce the one from the other. And a lot of times people ask us, well, it must be so impersonal, being online. And actually the part of the liberal arts that has to begin with is that relational piece, is going into someone's home, and you all coming into our homes, and, becoming a faculty of friends, the body and blood of the body of Christ, where we become one. So it is so important to do that. Recently, Dr. Aaron, I'm so jealous, got to meet with Father Nikolai Meyer, another instructor, and Ramona Bean, another instructor, and her family who is passing through. So where we are able to take the chance to, to get to know families, we do, and to see each other and to know each other and to get to know one another, we definitely do. So Dr. Aaron, I was very jealous. I should bring up that picture. I was very jealous
today because I'm wearing the same clothes. I have on my liberal arts shirt today because one of my favorite novels is The Little Prince. And of course I have a t-shirt for The Little Prince. We actually read that in level 4.
Yep.
I think
we leave it in level 4. So here's a picture
from this morning.
I'm so sad that I was not able to be there. Of course, I'm in Massachusetts and they're in Kansas, but this is exactly what our faculty of friends does, our community of learners. And of course, Ramona's kids were there, and Father Nikolai is proudly holding the Hungry Caterpillar translated into Greek, because that's going to be one of our classes this year, is Greek literature, reading and literature. And so students will be reading books that are very known to them, but have been translated into Greek. So very, very important. All right. who wants to field the next question I see here?
There was a question about placement. Can you help me with placement? So how do I know what level my student should be in? The quick answer is yes. Contact us and we can help you with absolutely with placement. We have some rough ages that go for each level, but sometimes we have a student who needs to be a little ahead or behind. And I wouldn't even call it behind, just that they need to, their reading level or their writing level would put them in a different class. But I don't know if our upper school instructors might want to speak to that at all, because there may be some questions too there about skill level in terms of, you know, the kinds of text and the kinds of writing you'll be doing.
Dr. Titus, Mrs. Smith?
I'll unmute myself. In that case, I would say the best option is actually just reaching out. I think on every syllabus, every instructor has their email listed. So if you have any doubts about what specific papers or debates or just assignments and kind of what's expected, I would just directly email the email that's on the syllabus for the specific class you're looking for and just start a direct conversation with the instructor, because they're going to have the best idea of what they're specifically planning on doing. That would be my unofficial advice. But yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, Dr.
That's
Titus,
definitely the best course of action to contact the instructor for sure.
Maybe I'll add this. I've had several families reach out, at least to me in the last, month or so, about maybe a student who had a learning difference. They were concerned about maybe something like dyslexia, their writing skill, at least in the lower skill. My response is always the same. Let's make sure your student is in a place where they can keep up with the reading. But I'm always willing to work with students for some modifications to assignments. So I do have students who will have a parent scribe sometimes to help with the writing assignment, which works great. That could be a whole other discussion, but I'm a big fan of that approach for creative writing when students are younger, because it helps them get their thoughts out. And then Presbyterian is going to tell us we do have a separate center through School for students with learning differences. But I know this has come up often recently. So
yes. So one of the things is, wow, you guys cover quite a bit of material, right? Is that really, how could a student keep up? And, we base the number of pages that are required to read based upon the average decoding speed of every, of a student for each level. But sometimes there needs to be assistance. So sometimes students have dyslexia, dysgraphia, right? And so we do have a Center for Students with Learning Differences, and we do have special needs instructors that are certified in their own right, and come to us to help students with need. And you can, get more information here on the page under the School Academy. You can request an initial consultation as well. In addition to that, we also have a tutoring center. So if you have a student that just needs some one-on-one time and needs some help into working something that is a focus for the year and just needs some extra support, we do have those services as well. And many of our instructors are tutors. We do have tutors that are just tutors and do not teach an actual class, whether in School or St. Raphael School, but they would be able to help as well. So this is a wonderful resource that many families do not know. Again, this isn't just for homeschool students. We do have students from brick and mortars that come to us as well for tutoring. So that's really important. Checking the questions. Are there
also
yes.
Also private instruction for a course, right? If a course doesn't fit with your schedule,
yes,
can reach out and see if the instructor will teach that privately. So
yeah, thank you for that reminder, Dr. Titus, because we do have families that do opt for private instruction for different reasons, whether the corporate class doesn't fit in their schedule or whether they just prefer a private instructor for a specific course, we are able to accommodate that. Mrs. Smith.
Yeah, I was just going to give one also just kind of real life example of I teach a catechism level for middle schoolers. And so I've had 13-year-olds in it. And then I even had for a time a 10-year-old who was turning 11 in the school year. And so there's also a knowledge the instructors know when we're looking at assignments. There's a difference between a 13-year-old citing their sources and doing their little assignments versus the 10-year-old. So I, as an instructor, also take that into account when I'm kind of deciding, was this magna cum laude? Was it just cum laude? Was it, I'm understanding their age and their kind of exposure before this as well. And I think most instructors would also be aware of, especially at that age, like people are coming with different backgrounds, and you can tell when you're reading the paper kind of what background. There's an element of flexibility, kind of knowing their ages, or instructors do reach out to parents if they have concerns, or just knowing kind of a background or what's going on in their life. That all feeds into it. So I don't think there's like a strict, you have to be at this level or there's nothing else we can do. It's very, every student brings their own thing, and we pick up on that, as a couple weeks in, we start picking up on that. So that's
I really am glad you brought that up, Mrs. Smith, because you mentioned two things that are really important that we should highlight. One, which is the growth model, right? We're definitely looking at scope and sequence. We're looking at helping the students and be in the right level, right? So that they are at an independent and not frustration, right? But we're looking at their growth, right? We're not comparing them to their peers in that regards. We're looking at how did they grow and what do they need to grow? And I actually, I had a wonderful art piece that I use because it just makes sense. And this will kind of top that, which is, every plant has their own requirements in order to grow. So do people. We all have our own requirements. So absolutely. And the other thing that Mrs. Smith mentioned that I think was really important is because our levels fall under, like, for example, level 1 is kindergarten, first grade, level 2, second grade, third grade. We are looking at flex groupings. We're not saying that students are in this level, right? It's actually flex groupings. And sometimes we'll have a student that, maybe chronologically they would be in one level, but really their readiness and their comfort is at a different level. And that's okay. And, our wonderful community of learners are used to seeing that, and then we have like this mentorship with the kids, the older kids with the younger kids. And of course, then that gives the modeling of, how something should be done within the classroom. And it really is a beautiful thing that happens in a natural way. Any other questions or comments? Questions or comments? I'm just looking at the chat box. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone. I'm being cognizant of the time. We were deemed to finish at 8:15, and so we're just 3 minutes away. But I want to thank everyone for coming and attending and asking these wonderful questions. If you do have further questions, please feel free. You can always reach out to me as principal of St. Raphael School. You can reach out to Dr. Aaron as well, and Dr. Titus and Mrs. Smith, accordingly based upon what they're teaching. But anything that we could do to help, please reach out specifically to those instructors, as both Dr. Titus and Mrs. Smith mentioned, and they're there to assist as well. But if there are no further questions, Mrs. Smith, would you like to close us with prayer today? Oh, you're muted.
Yes. I will. I'm going to do something that is, I feel like more rare in Orthodoxy, is more of a spontaneous prayer because I don't have any prayers prepped. for me, and
Beautiful.
that is okay.
Of
So,
course.
okay. Okay. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, thank you so much for gathering us, for giving us attentive hearts and minds to just focus on our children and our students and just our faculty as we just draw closer to you and best try to discover you through this classical learning environment. And go with us tonight and into the coming day, and bless us as we sleep and as we wake. Again, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. If you do have questions, you want to stick around, please do so. I'll be here. All right. Good night, everyone.